The day I hit 12 months of expenses saved, I did not celebrate. I sat in my car and cried, because for the first time in my adult life, no emergency could wreck me. I earned $30,000 that year, not the 40 or 50 most people assume you need. And the system that got me there had nothing to do with cutting out coffee or clipping coupons. It was 5 moves done in one specific order that anyone living paycheck to paycheck can start this week. Let me walk you through all 5. Before the moves, you need to understand why this matters more in 2026 than it did 5 years ago. There is a survey that comes out every year from Bankrate, and the newest numbers are rough. Only 3 in 10 Americans say they could pay a $1,000 emergency straight from savings. Let that settle for a second. 7 out of 10 people, if the transmission goes or a tooth cracks or the hours get cut, are reaching for a credit card, borrowing from family, or simply going without. 59% say they could not cover that $1,000 bill without falling into some form of debt. A separate report from U.S. News found something just as sobering. Among the people who actually have an emergency fund, the middle balance is only $5,000. That is not a year of safety. For a lot of households, that is barely 2 months of rent and groceries. Here is the trap nobody warns you about. When you have no cushion, every small problem becomes a financial event. A $400 car repair goes on a card at 20-something% interest, and by the time you finish paying it off, it cost you $600. Then, the next surprise hits before the first one is paid, and the balance creeps up instead of down. You are not bad with money. You are running with no margin, and no margin means every gust of wind knocks you flat. The whole point of an emergency fund is not to make you rich. It is to buy you something money usually cannot buy, which is time. Time to fix the car without borrowing. Enough breathing room to take a medical bill in stride instead of a spiral. And the freedom to hold out for the right job instead of grabbing the first desperate one that comes along. Let me make that concrete, because the word emergency can sound dramatic and far away, when in reality it almost never is. It is a water heater that dies in February. Maybe it is a check engine light 2 weeks before payday. Or it is your kid needing a $200 prescription the same month your rent goes up. On its own, any one of those is survivable. The problem is that they never wait their turn. They cluster, they overlap, and when you are already running on empty, one ordinary bad month is all it takes to knock you into debt you then spend the next 2 years digging out of. A funded account does not stop the water heater from dying. It just stops that dying water heater from becoming a wound that follows you around for years. And time is exactly why I aimed for a full year instead of the usual advice. You have probably heard that 3 to 6 months of expenses is the goal, and that advice is not wrong. It was just written for a calmer job market. Right now, the average person who loses their job spends close to 6 months finding the next one, and about 1 in 4 stay unemployed for more than half a year. 6 months of savings quietly assumes you land a new job right at the average. A full year assumes life does not go exactly to plan, which, in my experience, it almost never does. On $30,000 a year, I could not afford to be optimistic, so I built for the bad version of the story. And I am going to show you the exact way I did it, step by step. Now, I already know the thought running through some of your heads, because it ran through mine too. You are thinking there is no way you can save anything, that every dollar is already spoken for before it lands. I hear you, and I am not going to insult you by pretending it is easy. But I want to gently push back on one belief, because it is the belief that keeps most people stuck at zero forever. You do not need to find hundreds of dollars a month to begin. You need to start the machine. When I started, I could barely spare $25 a week, and there were weeks I could not even manage that. What mattered was not the size of the first deposits. What mattered was that the account existed, the habit was live, and the number was moving up instead of sitting at nothing. A tiny amount saved consistently beats a big amount you are always waiting to be able to afford. So wherever you are, even if it is $5, start the machine first and grow the fuel later. Move 1. Find your survival number, not your income. This is the step almost everyone gets wrong. And getting it wrong is why most people quit before they even begin. When folks hear a full year of expenses, they multiply their entire paycheck by 12, land on some terrifying figure, and give up on the spot. That is not what you are saving for. You are not replacing your whole salary. You are covering survival. So I sat down with 3 months of bank statements, and I sorted every dollar I spent into 2 piles. The first pile was the money that keeps a roof over my head and food in my body. That meant rent, utilities, my phone, groceries, transportation to work, the minimum debt payments I legally owed, and basic insurance. The second pile was everything else. It was the takeout, the streaming stack, the clothes I did not need, and the little treats that quietly add up to a lot. The sorting itself was uncomfortable, and it was supposed to be. I found subscriptions I had genuinely forgotten I was still paying for. Seeing how much those quick delivery orders added up to over 90 days honestly embarrassed me. But this pile is not there to shame you. It is there to show you the truth, and the truth is that your survival number is almost always lower than your spending number. The distance between those two is not exactly wasted money. It is the raw material you get to redirect toward your own safety. When I totaled only that first pile, my survival number came out to about $1,650 a month, not $2,100, which was roughly my take-home pay. $1,650 is what my life actually costs when I strip it down to staying housed, fed, and able to get to work. I multiplied that by 12, and my full year target landed at $19,800. Still a big number, but a real one, and far smaller than the monster figure I had been carrying around in my head. Do this yourself before you do anything else. Write your survival number down on paper, because it is the foundation everything else sits on, and for most people, it comes out hundreds of dollars a month lower than they ever expected. That gap between what you think you need and what you actually need is the first place hope sneaks back in. Move 2. Separate the money so you physically cannot touch it. The fund I was building could not live in my checking account, sitting right next to my rent money and my grocery money, one thumb tap away on the same app. Money you can see is money you will eventually spend, usually on something that felt urgent at 9 at night and looked foolish the next morning. So I opened a completely separate high-yield savings account at an online bank, and honestly, this one choice did more heavy lifting than any budgeting trick I ever tried. Let me explain why it matters so much. The average savings account in America right now pays about 0.38%. The strong online accounts, as I record this, pay around 4.15%, and a few pay even higher. That is the same deposit and the same effort for more than 10 times the return. I know the worry, because I had it too. You wonder whether an online bank is safe or whether your money gets trapped somewhere you cannot reach it. Both fears are understandable and both are unfounded. These accounts are insured by the FDIC up to $250,000, which is the identical protection your money gets at the biggest bank in your town. And you can move funds back to your checking in a day or two whenever a real need shows up. The reason online banks pay so much more is simple. They do not run thousands of expensive branches, so they hand that saving back to you as interest. Here is what the gap did for me in real dollars. Over the whole time I was building the fund, that account paid me almost $1,000 in interest. Parked in a normal account, earning the national average, the very same money would have earned me under $100. So choosing the right account quietly handed me close to $900 extra for doing nothing but picking a better place to keep it. That is most of a month of my survival number, earned while I slept. A high-yield account is free money you leave on the table every single day you wait. Choosing one is not complicated, so please do not overthink it and use the confusion as a reason to delay. You are looking for 3 things and nothing more. Find an account with no monthly fee, no minimum balance requirement, and that FDIC insurance I just mentioned. Ignore the flashy sign-up bonuses and the teaser rates that quietly drop after the first 3 months. A plain account from a well-known online bank that pays a solid rate every single day will beat a gimmick every time. Open it, connect it to your checking account, and then leave it alone to do its one and only job. Move 3. Automate the boring baseline so willpower never gets a vote. This is where a coworker of mine comes in, a guy I will call Darnell. Darnell earned almost exactly what I did, and his plan was to save whatever was left at the end of the month. In 2 full years, he saved almost nothing, and not because he was reckless or lazy. It was because at the end of the month, there is never anything left, no matter how much you make. That is not a character flaw. That is just how money behaves when you leave it exposed to a whole month of temptation. So I did the exact opposite of Darnell. I set up an automatic transfer that moved $475 into that separate account the morning after every payday, before I could see it, spend it, budget around it, or talk myself out of it. That amount worked out to a little more than 20% of my take-home pay, and you may have heard of the 50-30-20 rule, where roughly 20% of your income is meant to go toward savings. I want to flip how you think about that slice. Treat it like a bill, not a bonus. My savings transfer was as non-negotiable as my rent, and I scheduled it to leave my account the same day my paycheck arrived, so the money was gone before my brain even registered it had come. When it vanished automatically, I simply built the rest of my month around what remained, the same way I already did with rent. Were some months tight? Absolutely. And I am not going to pretend otherwise. But the transfer never once depended on me feeling motivated or disciplined on a random Tuesday, and that is the entire secret. Motivation is unreliable, and it always runs out eventually. A standing instruction at your bank does not care how you feel, and it never takes a day off. One more thing about that baseline, because it saved my sanity. If $475 a month feels impossible for you right now, do not let that stop you cold. Start with 50 or even 25 and set your first small goal at a single $1,000 saved. That first 1,000 is not the finish line, but it is the milestone that changes how you feel. It is the difference between a flat tire being a crisis and a flat tire being an annoyance. Once that starter cushion exists, you will guard it, and building on top of something always feels easier than building from nothing. Hit your first 1,000, feel that small taste of safety, and then keep climbing toward the full year. If this is already handing you a plan you can actually use, do me one favor and subscribe and stick around, because these next 2 moves are the ones that cut my timeline nearly in half. Now let me show you where the real acceleration came from. Move 4. Feed the fund with money you never planned to keep. That automatic transfer was the steady drip. But honestly, it was not the thing that carried me across the finish line. The accelerators did that, and the biggest one by far was my tax refund. At my income, with the credits I qualified for, I got back a little over $1,000 every spring, and each year I sent the entire refund straight into the fund the day it arrived. It never touched my checking account, so I never once felt like I had lost it. A lot of finance people will tell you a big refund is a mistake, that you are giving the government a free loan. They are technically correct, but for someone who struggles to save, A refund is one of the few forms of forced savings the system hands you, so I used it as a tool instead of fighting it. On top of the refund, I picked up occasional weekend shifts and small side gigs. Nothing that swallowed my life. Just a bit of extra work here and there that averaged out to under $100 a month. Then there was the category I started calling found money. This was the birthday cash from my aunt, the surprise $9 check from some class action settlement I forgot I joined. The $40 from selling a coat I never wore. Any dollar I was not already counting on went into that account instead of quietly dissolving into everyday spending. None of it felt like sacrifice, and that is precisely why it worked so well. You do not miss a refund you never planned to spend. You do not miss cash from a coat you forgot you owned. But funnel all of that unexpected money into one place for a couple of years, and it stacks into thousands of dollars that would otherwise have evaporated on things you would not even remember buying. My rule was blunt and easy to follow. Any money that was not already assigned a job in my budget belonged to the fund, not to a nicer dinner, and not to a small reward. And that single rule turned a slow crawl into something that genuinely reached the end. Move 5. Protect the fund from the one person most likely to raid it, which is you. Building the money is only half the battle, and the harder half is keeping it there when life starts whispering that you have plenty and surely one little withdrawal will not hurt. This is exactly where people quietly bleed their fund back down to zero without ever noticing it happen. So I made my rules before I needed them while I was calm and clear-headed. First, I wrote down in advance what actually counts as an emergency. A real emergency is unexpected, necessary, and urgent all at once. Car repairs that I need to get to work qualify. So does a surprise medical bill. But a weekend flight sale to visit a friend does not, no matter how good the deal looks. Deciding this while calm meant I was never negotiating with myself in a weak and wanting moment. My second rule was about refilling. Anytime I did have to spend from the fund, topping it back up became my number one financial priority until it was whole again, ahead of every goal except the essentials. The fund is a bucket with a slow leak called life, and your only job is to keep patching it and refilling it. My third rule was to keep every dollar of it liquid and boring. People get tempted to move their emergency money into the stock market to chase a nicer return, and I understand the pull, but this money is not an investment. Its entire job is to sit there in full, untouched, ready on the worst day of your year, whether or not the market happens to be down that particular week. A viewer named Tessa wrote to me a while back after she followed this exact framework. She had just crossed her own 12-month goal when her company ran a round of layoffs and her name was on the list. She told me the real difference between her and the coworkers panicking in the parking lot was not talent and it was not luck. It was that she had decided months earlier that this money existed for precisely this day, and so when it arrived, she met it with a plan instead of a panic attack. I also want to name the quiet ways people lose this fund so you can see them coming from a distance. The first is lifestyle creep, where you get a small raise or finally pay off a debt and simply absorb the extra into fancier spending so the fund never grows again. A second trap is treating the account like a checking overflow, dipping in for a sale or a trip and always meaning to pay yourself back later, which somehow never quite happens. The third is getting bored and shoving it into stocks or crypto to chase a bigger number, right up until the day you actually need it and the market happens to be down 20%. Name these three enemies now, while it is easy and calm, and you will recognize each one instantly when it shows up later wearing a friendly face. So, what did the whole build actually look like from beginning to end? It took me right around 30 months, which is about 2.5 years, of steady transfers, plus every refund and every scrap of found money I could scrape together. It was not fast, and it was definitely not glamorous. There were months I moved that transfer and immediately felt broke for the next 2 weeks. But the account kept climbing, slow and stubborn. The interest kept quietly adding itself to the pile on top of what I put in, and then one completely ordinary afternoon I logged in, and the balance read just over $19,800. A full year of my life sitting right there, waiting to protect me. That is the moment I told you about at the very start, the one that left me in tears in my car. And it was never really about the money itself. It was about what the money meant, which was that the next time life came for me, and it always eventually does, I would get to respond like a person with options instead of a person in a corner. And I want to be honest about what actually changed, because it turned out to be far more than a number on a screen. I started sleeping through the night. That small jolt of dread every time my phone buzzed with an unknown number slowly faded away. When my manager got difficult and the job turned genuinely toxic, I did not have to just swallow it and smile, because I knew I could walk if I truly had to, and that quiet knowledge changed how I carried myself inside that building. Money that just sits there, doing nothing, turned out to be the least idle money I have ever owned. It was buying me calm and steadiness and a spine every single day it stayed untouched. Here is the piece that stayed with me long after the number was hit. Nobody ever taught me any of this. Not in high school, not in college, not anywhere along the way. I had to lose sleep, make mistakes, and stitch the whole system together myself, on a salary the world kept insisting was far too small to build anything real on. And that, honestly, is the exact problem I want to help you skip past. Building this kind of safety net is just one of a handful of money skills that quietly separate the people who feel secure from the people who feel like they are always one bad week away from disaster. So the very next thing I want you to watch is my full breakdown of the money lessons schools never taught, because it fills in the rest of what this video only began. Your emergency fund is the foundation you pour first. That other video is the house you get to build on top of it. Before you head out, I genuinely want to hear from you, because the comments on these videos help far more people than you would ever guess. Tell me where you honestly are in your own journey right this week. Are you starting from zero? Are you halfway to your number? Or are you already sitting on a full year and remembering how it felt to finally get there? When you actually add it up, what is your survival number? And did it surprise you the way mine surprised me? And if money was never really taught to you either, tell me the one lesson you wish somebody had sat you down and explained when you were younger. Somebody scrolling these comments might be a single sentence away from finally starting, so please do not keep your story to yourself. I read these, and I will meet you down there.